When I mentioned a Midrash, we spoke about there's a famous Ramban that initially that Aaron was not included in the inauguration of the Mishkan. He believed that this reflected on his level of unworthiness because of his participation in the Chet Egel. Therefore, he and his tribe were actually disqualified from participating in the inauguration of the Mishkan. So Hashem says, no, Aaron, you're mistaken. Your participation is greater than theirs. Why? Because you will light the menorah. So we discussed it. So Ramban asks, the Nisim, they brought their korbanos, their sacrifice, and their gifts that one time, and that was it. Aaron continuously officiates. The only Kohen that's qualified to officiate in Yom Kippur is only the Kohen Gadol. So the Kohen Gadol has one of a value which nobody else has, to enter into the Holy of Holies. So why? Because they were included in the inauguration, and he was not. Somehow this reflected on his level of unworthiness. So we explained it the way we explained. That's the Ramban's question. So he explains, he cites a Midrash, the way the Ramban learns the Midrash. Yours is greater than theirs. Why? Because the lighting of menorah will surpass the existence of the Beis Hamikdash and the existence of the Mishkan. Why? Because in the future, when the Greeks are going to contaminate the oil during Bayesheni, the second Beis Hamikdash, and they're going to find one vial of oil, and it's going to burn 8 days, although it was only enough to burn 1 day, Chazal will legislate the mitzvah of the lighting of menorah that every Jew will be able to do. Every Jew will do in his home. So what you're doing now will be commemorated, and it will exist beyond the existence of the Beis Hamikdash. While Karbanos, or whatever they did, is limited to that particular time. The Mishkan, the Beis Hamikdash. But the lighting of the Hanukkah lights surpasses any of that because it goes beyond the existence of the Beis Hamikdash. It's really pretty, what we call the dochik. It's like really pushing it. So what are we speaking about? But I'd like to read the Midrash and the way the Alshech is a commentator on the Chumash, and he explains it. Let's read the Midrash. So at the beginning, Aaron was offended and he felt he was unworthy. He says, tell Aaron you have nothing to be concerned about. Your participation is meant for great distinction. The korbanos, as long as the Beis Hamikdash exists, they're in place, they function. Al haneros, but the lights, l'olam, they surpass the existence of the Beis Hamikdash. So firstly, another question is, even according to Ramban's interpretation, who's lighting the menorah beyond the existence of the Beis Hamikdash? We're talking about ordinary Jews. Besides being only rabbinical, only the ordinary Jew lights it. So this has nothing to do with Aaron. Every Jewish household has an obligation to light the menorah to commemorate the miracle of Hanukkah. So what does it mean? So the Ramban's interpretation is very difficult, but the Midrash says, Karbanos kozmash shkayom shem nogen. As long as the Beis Hamikdash exists, korbanos are in place. Aval neiros, but the lighting of the kindling of lights is forever. It's not contingent on the Beis Hamikdash. So over here, he cites the Alshech. Just give you background. The Alshech in the 1500s, there was a shul in Tzfas. It was called the Arizal Shul. In the Arizal Shul, I'll tell you who davened in that shul. The Arizal, the Beis Yosef, or Yosef Karo, Reb Shlomo Alkabitz, the author of the Chododi, he was the Chazan, and the Alshich, his name was Moshe Alshich, he said the Drushos. He was the lecturer in that shul. So the posek of the shul, the Rav, was Rav Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. The spiritual guide of the shul was the Arizal. Rav Shlomo Alkabitz, the author of Chododi, he was the Chazan. And the Alshich was the Darshan. He would give the drushes. You imagine what kind of shul this is. So the Alshich, now we're quoting the Alshich, and this is the recordings of those lectures. This is one, that's part of that work called Alshich al Torah. So he writes, I'm reading inside. It says, El mul pnei menorah yu'iru. When Aaron lights the lights, El mul pnei menorah, it's opposite the menorah. Mul means opposite. Klomar, kol ma shebimigdash shel mato, gashmi, yesh lo mosel lamalu ruchoni. Whatever action we take below, there is something which reflects that action in the spiritual realm. As there's a physical menorah on the terrestrial level, there's a representation of that menorah in the spiritual realm. There's a spiritual menorah. She menorahs haTorah shamarnu po, and that's the menorah haTorah, the purest menorah. So what does it mean when you elevate the lights? When Aaron goes and he kindles those lights on the physical menorah, and you give acknowledgement and distinction to honor Hashem through the lighting of those lights, you must know, not only do you illuminate the location which you light the lights, you're also activating and kindling the spiritual menorah. The lighting on the terrestrial level activates the kindling, the illumination of the holy menorah and the spiritual menorah. And where will it illuminate? There, in the spiritual world. Od lo yichbe. It will never be extinguished. That menorah is never extinguished. Once Aaron activates and sets the dynamic in motion, and he activates and kindles that spiritual menorah, lo yichbe, it will never be extinguished. Came yo'iru tom lefnei Hashem. That menorah will always illuminate before Hashem. Shein tzovik shaner shel malo ein tzorich lahadlik yom yom. The spiritual lights, you don't have to kindle every day. Kimi ayomahu shedlikos Aaron lemato. So Aaron, that we have the special illumination in the spiritual realm, that the menorah actually illuminates, that's only done once. You don't need it more than once to activate. Once that system is activated, it's already in place. They remain illuminated forever. Because that initial lighting that Aaron had kindled, nimtzo, sheroshim hadloko hahi, that the effect and the imprint of that kindling, omer afilu la'achar churban, that surpasses the Beis Hamikdash even after its destruction. She im nechrav shalmato, even though the Beis Hamikdash on the terrestrial level was destroyed, lo nechrav shamalo, the Beis Hamikdash in heaven, the spiritual, the counterpart, that's not destroyed. But the karbonos that the Nesiim, the princes, brought to inaugurate the Beis Hamikdash, the Mishkan, ein haroshim she'osu nishar load mi'oz kanerus. The effect, the impact, is not something which is eternal. Okay, so it comes out this. So the lighting of the menorah of Aaron, the imprint, the effect is eternal. It created a dynamic of illumination, that illumination is forever. Now the question is why? Right? Why is his forever? So he said because he's the Kohen, he's deficient. And that's what Hashem is revealing. What they do is for that moment. Aaron, you being who you are, the effect of your action, its ramification goes beyond the Beis HaMikdash, beyond the Mishkan. But just to bring it to another level, all the siyata d'shmaya that we have to understand Torah Sheba'al Peh, where does it emanate from? From the lighting of that menorah. So if that's the case, we have a problem. If you say bracha, korbanos generates bracha, so we have less of a bracha. But if the whole siyata d'shmaya emanates from the lighting of the menorah, and we still say, if you want wisdom, when you say the Amidah, it says yadrim, you should say it in a southerly direction because the menorah was in the southern side of the covered sanctuary. What does that have to do with then, now? That was then. Then it was generating clarity, which was elucidation, illumination. But today it doesn't exist. It's no longer illuminating. So, but if you go with the Al-Shech, that illumination, what Aaron did, has to go beyond the Beis HaMikdash. Beyond why? Because if the basis for existence is the study of Torah, and we have to pursue that, and we have to come upon its truths, therefore the effect of Aaron's action can't be just for the moment. That lighting activated these forces, which always provide that level of illumination, that we should be able to come upon the truth of Torah, which is the Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is the oral law. And that's Shelcho Gedol Shem. So that we have relevance to the truth of Torah, which we said, Yogata Motzosa Tamin, that if you toil in Torah, you will come upon its truth. You should believe that the reason why we come upon its truth is because of that force that Aaron initially activated, which is always available. And therefore, as a result of that, if you want to have relevance to wisdom, which you stand Shmon Esrei, Yadrim, it should be in a southerly direction, because you're still able to draw upon that energy, which will endow you with Chokhmah, with wisdom for that reason. So with this Al-Shech, it's very nice why it surpasses the existence of the Beis HaMikdash or the Mishkan, and also even in terms of the effect. But just to mention the Ramkhal and the Maral, the Ramkhal and Maral explain that we find that Yom Tovim are not just commemorative, but rather it's a reenactment of the moment at that particular time in history. For instance, on Yud Dalid, when we brought the Korban Pesach, Erev Pesach, the night of the Seder, the Jews, when they were eating the Korban Pesach, and we find the Seder we have with the Mitzvah Matzah, we no longer have the Pesach, the Paschal Lamb, but we discuss the bondage, the redemption, and we have many mitzvahs at the Seder which are rabbinical. The 4 cups of wine, which correspond to the 4 expressions of Gula. We eat the Moror, because they embittered our lives. Although Moror is only a Doraisa, only if it's eaten together with the Korban Pesach. If we don't have the Korban Pesach, we say, but that's what we did when the Beis HaMikdash existed. But what's its value? So the Ramkhal explains, and the Maral explains, but the Ramkhal much more, that on that day, that moment when we ate the Korban Pesach, the forces that were released, which made a difference, which affected the Klal Yisrael, on that night, on that date, the same forces are released. So the forces of redemption are released. We have to be beneficiaries of those forces. We have to capture those forces, those energies. So we create a vessel. What's the vessel? We create a setting which somehow resembles and represents what was then. There was Dal and the Shonei Gula. So we have 4 cups of wine that we say the Haggadah on, that each cup corresponds to one of those expressions of redemption. So that's the vessel to capture that energy, that we should be beneficiaries of that energy as they were beneficiaries then. Identically, the embitterment of our lives, which is symbolized through the Moror, although on a Torah level, it's only when you eat it with the Korban Pesach, nevertheless, rabbinically, we have it, it's legislated rabbinically, certain species if you eat, that is the Moror. And when you eat it, whatever that represents in the spiritual realm, you capture those forces that because they bid our lives, we merited those forces, which was the redemption. That's the Ramkhal. So I'm saying the same thing. When they legislated the lighting of the Hanukkah menorah, which had to do with the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, that to commemorate the miracle, that miracle that happened then, that was something Hashem brought about a certain force which surpassed physical existence. There was only enough oil to burn one night, it burnt 8 nights. So we, although we're not Kohanim, when we imitate what they had done then, which is a symbolism, we become beneficiaries to capture the forces that brought about the miracle of Hanukkah. And that's why it's cited la'alocha that Hiddur mitzvah, you should use oil, olive oil. Why? Because just as in the Beis Hamikdash, the only fuel that was qualified for the menorah was shemen zayis, only olive oil. It's preferable to use olive oil to commemorate the miracle of Hanukkah because that's how the miracle initially took place. Not to use other means of fuel like a wax candle or any other type of candle. It should be oil for that reason. But again, it's because, it's for us to be the beneficiaries. So the menorah that Aaron had kindled, that the effect is forever. But to be beneficiaries of that, and we have to be beneficiaries, because that's directly the basis for Torah Shemal Peh. So therefore, we light the candles on Hanukkah. That lighting allows us to be beneficiaries of those forces, what Aaron put in place. So when we study Torah, we should be able to come upon its truths due to the illumination.